were like, oh great, you did monochrome, the complete accident. This is for science class, not for monochrome day. And I did have 3 people guessed I was a character from Star Wars, which is so far off the mark. The reason I'm starting out and dressing and we're listening to this music, which is probably a little too loud in order to be able to hear things, so I'll turn down a little bit. As I'm going to start, I'm not a huge history person. History and geography eluded me for a long time. That's why I thought that Korea was next to Norway for ages, because I am that bad at things. But I love the story of Gregor Mendel. He was a monk in what's now the Czech Republic. Anybody here from the Czech Republic? And knows where Brno is? Yeah?
What page?
Pardon? Yes, it's in Eastern Europe. But I was just curious if anybody's been there. Yeah.
What page are we on?
We are on this page. It is the page after. It's like page 24 or something. Yeah. 22. He was born in 1822. And likely because that was a profession in which you could be reasonably assured of a roof over your head, a reasonably quiet life, and food. If you were born to a large family and you're not going to be able to inherit the farm, and there's no other options, a lot of people would join the church. So there's a monastery, and his pastime was to grow pea plants. And one of the big differences between just doing stuff and doing science is counting and writing it down. And he did a lot of them. And so he was one of the first people that I know of that discovered the laws of genetics. And he was elucidating things about genetics that we then eventually only confirmed rather than proved when we learned about structure of DNA and chromosomes and genes and all those types of things. Now, if anybody has, because my background obviously grew up in BC, I'm English speaking, this is the history that I've learned. If people have other examples around the world that they know of where these types of things were done and other people who've done them, because in antiquity, I am sure other cultures were making similar discoveries. I'm always curious where it comes from. It blew my mind once when I first did learn history that every country who has a story about who killed the Red Baron claims to have killed the Red Baron. But if you learn it in Canada, it will be a Canadian. If you learn it in France, it'll be the French gunners on the ground. If you learn it all over, it's a different person. And so I'm always curious what other stories there are out there. He was in the Augustinian monastery, and I have no idea what that means. I don't know if this dress is even mildly appropriate. He'd probably walk in here and be hugely irritated because I'm wearing my sash on the wrong side. I don't know. The music is Benedictine. I think for a while it was soft pop songs, so probably hugely insulting as well. But I'm hoping it goes with the vibe. A quiet monastery. You'd hear in this monastery singing like this as he'd be working with his pea plants. He was 1856, 1863, and he was growing edible because they did have to eat them. Pea plants. I believe it is reasonably cold there, so to get a good start on the growing season, a lot of people did have greenhouses if they could afford them. And of course, a monastery growing food for everybody there. And over the course of his lifetime, by our count, because we have access to his original notes, for science, he grew about 28,000 pea plants, focusing on about 7 traits, all of which corresponded to a single locus or gene locus on a chromosome, so they fit really well with what we now name after him, Mendelian genetics. This is the simplest form of genetics. There are more complicated things that you'll learn later on if you go on, but this does explain a heck of a lot about inheritance and genes. Since I am the one who once thought that Korea was next to Norway, and supremely incompetent in that range, I thought we'd orient ourselves in the world. So the Czech Republic is here. And I believe he is somewhere. Yeah. If you know where Brno is exactly, because you've been there. Look, no, hold it. Yeah, I think that's roughly where it is. I could be way off in the country, though. My memory for places is poor. But he looked at a bunch of, I think, 7 traits. So the kinds of things that you could easily tell by looking at it, pea plants will make either smooth or wrinkled peas. They'll either be yellow or green. The pods will either constrict right against the peas, or they'll be nice, shiny, smooth, and oval. The pods themselves can be yellow and green, independent of the pea inside them. You can look at flower color. You can look at where the flowers grow, at the junctions or at the tips. And you can look at whether they're tall or short. 2 meters tall is quite tall. We're going to focus on the latter one. But just for clarity, in terms of this whole diagram, when you're looking at traits, everything on this side is what we would now refer to as a dominant trait. And everything on this side is a recessive trait. And these visible things that you can see in an organism that are inherited, what are those things called? You have an organism's genotype, which is what genes it has. But what it looks like is its phenotype. So, what it looks like. You're on the wrong page.
Me?
Yep. No.
Anders.
And put the drink up. Your pen should be out. You're snacking in between taking out notes. Then get out a piece of paper and copy everything down as best you can. And hold it. Is this your binder?
Oh my god. Wow, dude, you're safe.
Got your back.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's cool. He's backing his brother.
Dude,
Yeah.
what was the inspiration for this bit?
Yeah.
But hold it. Who are we talking about?
I know we're talking
Who?
about
Who are we
Mandela.
talking about?
I
Oh,
know.
what is he?
I'm up.
Oh, what am I dressed as?
I look like a Roman slave.
Smack, 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 smack. I mean, I have on a sack. Oh. Where's the...
Get into the arena.
It could be because I took off my cowl. I might have left it in the house. It was really hot.
You wearing stuff on?
No, I'm completely naked under this.
Fair enough.
Yeah? I mean, next we're going to talk about incense, so calm down. To put him in his, where he is, growing his pea plants, he had a little greenhouse. They're actually, this is a diagram from when the building actually existed. Someone remade the diagram. They're going to build a new greenhouse there. I don't know if it's for tourist purposes or they just want to like recreate what it was because it is fairly famous. That's what it looks like today. The greenhouse would sort of be in this area. Pea plants, flowers, and they grow peas. I mean, there's not that much. Peas, for me, are the least objectionable vegetable. So, I mean, broccoli shouldn't even exist. Okay, observation number 1. Do you have this in your notes? Like, is it already pre-drawn? Okay, that way, I mean, I guess you have a model. I should have erased it because you're going to draw your own pea plants, but use that as a model. We're going to start off, we're going to breed some short pea plants. Yes?
Are we going to be growing things?
No, we're not going to be growing things. To do that would take a whole growing season and far longer than we have in this course. I sympathize. I would love to grow things. If you take biology in grade 12, particularly AP, you will grow fruit flies. Because you can very quickly grow them and see the traits and genetics.
Wait, you grow?
Hands, if you have a question. Again, hands, if you have a question. Yes?
You can grow.
They lay eggs and then they hatch.
So you don't eat them?
You
Wait,
gr-
so you just have like the fruit and then the flies just come? Or is it just up there?
So you birth them?
I didn't see your hand.
It was
In the same way you can grow anything that has eggs, you feed it, it will lay eggs, and then you grow them. Yeah.
Okay, so
It's not a complicated.
so the fly doesn't just come from.
But we're not going to do that. We're doing this.
Okay.
Okay. So, labeling. The technical term for this is parents. So that's the parent generation, and we call that the P generation. And we're going to label them both. Their phenotype is short. So he took two short plants and he bred them together. Put them in a small room, played soft music, candlelight dinner. And then you got a short plant. Whoa, why did that move back? A short plant? A short plant. A short plant. And the fourth one, you may have guessed it, another short plant. I am going to be doing almost all of these in ratios of 4, which will become obvious later why I'm doing that, why I didn't do just one, because it works really well if you use 4 when you have things other than the same thing. So 100% short. This is known as the first filial generation and is labeled F1. Hand? Yes! Louder. The monk music is driving you away.
What's the thing in brackets next to the current generation?
Oh, that's a P. P for parent. There you go.
Wait,
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
after it says first.
Filial.
Okay.
F-I-L-I-A-L. That should be an A there if you're in confusion. Okay. He then made a stunning observation. The offspring were identical to the parents. Like a lot of observations in science, we're going to start off slow and establish some groundwork. Make some definitions now that we've put them up there, just to say what they are. I'm going to skip that one for a moment. Parent generation. Question?
How do bees like reproduce?
Pollen. And bees, although in this case, no bees.
So how does
As no one has explained the birds, the bees for you? When a mommy pea plant and a daddy pea plant love each other very much,
Oh,
someone else comes in and makes them touch.
it's yucky.
Yeah.
Is it consensual?
Did I call on you? Did you put up your hand? Yeah, there we go. How do pea plants? They can't move. How do they move their sex cells around? Yes. Nope. Well, some do actually. No, that's actually true. Yes. Spores are more like mushrooms. This is more like pollen. So yes. Bees. Yeah. And now, just to be clear, inside his greenhouse, there are no bees. If you're imagining monk music in the background and the pleasant humming of bees, there are no bees. He has made sure that there are no bees. Why? Yes?
so that you can know exactly what's
Right.
going
He's the bee. He's got a little, very fine paintbrush that he has taken, and he has taken the pollen from one plant and putting it in the flower of another plant, and he is moving the pollen around. So he's the bee. And he did that for all of his plants, so he can control what reproduces with plant. And so there are no bees in here. he is actually controlling who is having sex with whom. So, P generation.
Yes.
First two parent plants. And then after that, we have the first filial, F1. I really didn't leave enough room on these lines, but that is the spawn of the parents. So, continued with the experiment. So what do you do when you continue with the experiment? You take the children and you breed them together.
Whoa.
No, we don't want to. Too bad. You are locked in a room until nature takes its course. So, he would take the pollen from one, he puts the pollen on the other. These are the F1 spawn. So these, F1, they're plants.
It still has to be.
And when he did this a second time, guess what kind of offspring he got?
Short.
They're all short. Yeah, that's the same. So I need to get 4 more.
Good.
Gentlemen, there's going to be a lot of discussion of like sex and genetics and incest. You are going to be able to. Are you going to be able to hold it in?
Yes.
Okay. What? Are you, number one, why would you randomly yell at a comment just to disturb the class? Shh.
This is
Listen to the monk music. Quiet. I haven't called on you. You haven't put up your hand. Quiet, please. No. After that, definitely not.
Would that be F2?
Have I called on you?
Oh.
No calling out. And no, it wouldn't. This is what we would call F2. The second filial. No change. All short. And he called this true breeding. And it didn't matter which pea plants he picked, as long as both were short, the children would always be short, and the children of the children would always be short, and the children of the children of the children would always be short. Maybe more inbred, one would assume, but again, they're pea plants. So, a couple other definitions. True breeding. True breeding means offspring identical to parents. True breeding plants will always give the same trait, provided you are breeding them with each other. There.
If you were to breed a tall plant with a short plant, which
We are going to go into all of those. Yep. Coming up.
So, if you're too short, like parents.
No. Pea plants.
Okay, but like, you know, like.
Pea plants.
So there's a pea plant.
No.
Victor
No.
Wembanyama. His parents are
Zip it.
that tall.
Zip it. Pea plants.
So if there were two average
Julian,
size
Julian,
plants.
you're not listening. Pea plants.
Like pea.
Once we're done, you can ask that kind of question more because it gets more complicated. But the short answer is, with other species and other traits, it gets far more complicated. Yes.
So to breed them, he gets the paintbrush.
Yeah, and takes the pollen out of the flower,
And then
Inserts
just
it.
and then puts it into another flower,
That's how they do it.
And then what happens?
and then it makes a seed, just like flowers always do.
Where does the seed
Oh.
come out of?
And then does
Hold it. Flowers become the seed.
What?
That's what seeds are. They're the ex-flower.
So the flowers drop and then that's the seed.
Yeah. The flower shrivels up and it makes a seed there where you fertilize
I don't
it.
know about that.
and then
Someone definitely needs to explain the birds and the bees to you. Given I'm a biology teacher, I might have to do that.
so
Yeah.
I get the pollen and
Yeah.
bring it to another flower. But what happens to that flower? Does it just
You can also pollinate that one.
But eventually it'll be like one of them won't be able to get pollen.
No, they can exchange pollen. You can give that one pollen from any flower you like. They can all get pollen.
Okay.
Yeah. There are plants that have both male and female parts. A lot of plants, the flower is both the male and female plant parts. So it will take essentially sperm from another plant, and it has its own eggs as well, and they will all just be exchanging sperm the whole time, all the way around. If you're ever outside, and it's a lovely day, and it's springtime, and there's a lovely blossoming tree, and the pollen blows in your face, just remember that that is just blowing tree sperm at you, and you're getting covered in it at the moment, because that's all really pollen is. Yes.
So do peas have genders?
Yes, plants can have genders.
Kiwi.
There is both ova and egg, but they're a little different in plants. I'm not going to go through all of pea plant biology, but they do have. They need the two They need the two parts.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you said can both like plants be impregnated, or is it just like
Yeah.
both of them?
Yeah.
So they're
Yeah.
unisex.
Yeah. Yes. Pea plants have sexual reproduction.
Like a kiwi, but that has genders. Gotta be together.
What?
Did you know that?
I will try and figure out what you're saying later.
And a male kiwi.
Anders, focus. That's okay.
Me?
Not calling across. Hand if you have a question. Do you have a question? No. Okay. Now, last one. Filial. Second filial. F2 generation. Is the spawn of the F1. So we know it's true breeding. We take the children, breed the children, they still get short. Take the children of the children, breed, still get short. Short, always, and didn't matter what two he got. And the numbers aren't like, I'm putting 4 down because we're going to see other ratios, and it's really, 4 fits really well. We'll see that later when we do Punnett squares. But his numbers are like, 240, 265, 252. They correspond into 4 different amounts. Now for this one, it's just 100% of one. Okay, next experiment.
Could you go?
Yes.
So, if in your parent generation,
Yeah.
you choose 2 parents, let's say one is short, one is tall, what
We're getting to that. Getting to that. But we're not doing that yet. We're doing the next case. We bred 2 shorts together. So what would the obvious next step be? 2 talls.
Yes.
We looked at what shorts do. Let's see what the talls do.
Same thing. What if they're loose? What if they gain chromosomes?
Anders? Julian? Ooh, do I need to move?
No.
In this particular case, now, this is not one where you see case 1. This is not going to be F2. These are 2 separate cases. So the first case, he breeds the tall together. And guess what happens?
They get a tall.
They just make tall. Fairly boring. Exactly like the short example. If he takes 2 random tall plants, sometimes he gets this case 1. So this is, one second, parent generation. This is F1. It is true breeding. And I'm going to draw a line between case 1 and case 2 because they are unrelated in terms of plant. This is not going to be the F2. Question, Julian?
Why do you always draw 4 plants? Like what they always do 4?
Later on, it's going to become obvious. If you always do things in groups of 4, it makes it really easy in terms of ratios. Because it turns out for single, for gene pairs that are controlled by a single gene in which you have different types, it always happens in groups of 4. So even though it's 100% of 1, it's easier when you look back. Second case, picks a random Now, just to be clear, in case, not clear, but to ask, just in case the other class lied to me, you don't do this in meta, right? You don't Punnett squares or genetics in meta? Okay. Some of you may have done it. I know other school systems, they do their genetics in grade 9. So for some of you, this will be just review. Yeah?
Peas have twins.
Don't know. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know that level of pea reproduction. Prediction for this one. What kind of you're going to get?
Are those 2 tall?
Yes, those are 2.
Tall, short, so 50-50?
No, tall,
Tall, short. 3 to 1. How many think all tall?
Wait, aren't those both tall?
Those are both tall.
All tall.
I believe all.
And all, how many think all short?
All tall.
Well, didn't you have your hand up twice? That sounds like hedging your bets. These are both tall ones.
Then all tall.
To get a comparison in terms of how I draw, copy. When I draw short, they look like this. They only have 1 leaf on it,
Wow.
just to really make that point, to make it easy. Okay. Sometimes he has 2 talls, he breeds them together, he gets all tall. They are, in fact, true breeding.
Yes.
The other times, he'll pick 2, and he'll get a tall, and then he'll get another tall, and then he'll get another tall, and then 1 short.
No.
Wait,
Yeah.
is that because having a tall pea trend or tall pea plant is recessive? Is that gene recessive?
If you tend to see it more often, would it be dominant or recessive?
Dominant.
So tall is probably the dominant.
Isn't there some that's like dominant that's super rare?
If it's deleterious or bad for you in some way, dominant genes tend to get eliminated fairly quickly because they always present if you have them. Whereas recessive traits can be more likely to be bad for you because they have to both be present sometimes for you to be able to get it. And in some cases, if you have a recessive trait, but you don't have both of them, that actually can improve your health. But if you had both, it could not improve it. Sickle cell anemia is one of those examples, if you live in an area with malaria. Okay, so we have the parent generation. We have F1. It is not true breeding. You can imagine how much this one is a disappointment to its parents. They're like, you were going to be a doctor, and now you want to go play guitar and join a band? How dare you? We paid for your Brentwood College education, and then just like the lectures, it looks nothing like its other siblings. All its siblings are successful engineers and lawyers and doctors, and they're playing in a band in Duncan.
He wants to be Twitch streamers.
I want to be a YouTuber.
Oh no, Twitch streamer turned out to be too hard for them.
I want to be a YouTuber.
You can. It's pretty. You just
You do
hook
anything
it
I
up.
want. You know, I used to be a YouTuber.
Gentlemen, focus. Genetics. Too loud when you're talking. Then I notice. Any other any questions? Okay, laying the groundwork. So then he decided to do an experiment. So he's established these two cases. His first experiment, I'm going to grab a couple of these. I'm going to set it up. Then he takes a true breeding tall. And a true breeding short. And breeds them together.
Can we run predictions with this?
I'll ask for predictions in just a moment. Yep, but now call it out.
Over or under?
Oh, label these. So, true breeding. So he has a tall one from this case. He knows that that's a true breeding tall. And essentially any short plant he knows is already true breeding. Puts them together. Puts on some soft music. Candles. Nice dinner. And his paintbrush. And predictions. Yes?
Too tall, too short.
Too tall, too short.
All tall.
All tall. All tall.
Oh, sugar raw. 3 tall, 1 short.
3 tall, 1 short.
I think it's gonna be all of them medium sized with 1.5 leaves.
Random
Wow.
mix.
I like, you are jumping so far ahead. What you're describing is an example of incomplete dominance that we're going to do later. But in this case, I can already rule it out. This is a very simple Mendelian genetics. Yes?
Random mix.
A random mix. You get something different every time. No. You get all tall. The shortness completely disappears. Or does it?
Yeah, good luck.
Am I going to want to ask this question?
Yes.
Yeah, go.
I have a question. So, do the tall ones produce more peas? So why wouldn't, if they do?
That is a question about production. We're talking about genetics and his experiments, so we're not too worried about that. And to be honest, I have no idea. Riley,
Is it possible to do like 2 short, 1 tall, and then like would that balance out?
and in terms of parents, you can't have 3 parents.
But like, because if it's pollen,
Oh, but the egg, what you get fertilized, to put it in a mammalian sense, let's say someone has 2 boyfriends and 2 dates in one night. Is it possible that any of the children could have 2 dads?
No.
No, because regardless of what happens, that egg will be fertilized by 1 sperm. So even if there's multiple different types around. Now you can get the case in which there has been cases of fraternal twins that have unrelated fathers.
What about?
In which case an egg split, and so they're actually somewhat identical, but the fathers are different. You can also just have 2 eggs released at the same time, each one fertilized by a different father, and so you can have that sort of thing happening. But 1 egg, 1 sperm, 1 person, you can't have 3 parents. Yes.
What about CRISPR?
Pardon?
What about CRISPR?
We're not putting genetic technology. Remember, 1822 he was born. CRISPR is not even a glimmer in a scientist's eye. Yes.
What if they're conjoined twins? Then they would have.
That is independent of anything with genetics or
That's
anything.
pretty cool.
Yeah, they're still different people if they have different brains.
Yeah, but like, what about their bottom half? Still have 2 legs. It's just one
Yeah,
of
but
the monsters.
they're still 2 different people if they have 2 different brains.
Fair enough.
If I sew you together with Julie in some sort of weird caterpillar-like fashion,
Cool.
Human cat.
yeah, you still have different parents.
Yo.
Okay, label it. This is F1. This is the parent generation. So all tall, he takes those children. No, please don't. My paintbrush is coming. And he takes that F1 generation and he breeds it together. So he takes the two tall children. What is the ratio of this product?
Oh,
All tall.
Yes?
3 tall, 1 short.
3 tall, 1 short.
yeah.
1, 2, 3, and shorty short pants. And this is F2. And so he is now, from his original true breeding tall, he was able to replicate case number 2, in which he had 2 tall plants and they had that. So he was able to, somehow, the short gene is able to hide. He didn't call it a gene, he called it a factor. We hadn't yet even come close to figuring out how DNA was working. In fact, scientists a little bit in the future, early 1900s, were coming up with really weird theories. One thought there was a little homunculus. A homunculus. A homunculus is a little tiny human. This is a drawing of one theory, which is that they thought all of the sperm had little people in it. And that when you impregnated a woman, it would get bigger and it would become the person. The woman didn't really provide anything except for the growing place. The children were just related to dad, not necessarily related to mom at all.
That kind of makes sense, though.
And so from an
I would believe that.
18th century misogynistic patriarchal person who doesn't observe very well, because have you not noticed that the children can also look like mom? That made sense for a little while. It was eventually dismissed as being completely ridiculous. Someone pointed out the absurdity of it, and it lasted for. But this is after Mendel. Mendel's work literally was put onto a shelf in a monastery, and nobody looked at it until early 1900s. Someone refound it and said, "Hey, this answers some of the stuff we've been discovering, and confirms it." And he did it. He did it way first.
Wait, who?
Mendel,
Howie Mandel.
Nelson.
not Howie. Not Howie. Please don't say Howie.
Nelson Mandela.
And not Nelson. Please don't do that to poor Nelson. Okay, F1, F2, we've got true breeding, and then so we now know that this is not true breeding.
Those are the parents.
F1 in this case is the parents, but we label them differently because the parents are the originals. And then when we mate the F1, we still call it these are what we mated together. That's the F1. They then make the F2. If you mate the F2, you can get the F3. But now, mating the F2, you have choice. We can take the short one and the tall one, and you can have all sorts of outcomes. We're going to just stop there because it gets more complicated. Am I still writing that down? Flipping over, here was his reasoning. He thought there should be factors present for both tallness and shortness because he could see that these things would disappear and reappear. So there's some sort of factor in there. What is it called when you always pass down the same trait?
Hereditary.
True breeding. So he knew there was true breeding. There's traits that could always be passed down, or traits that, if you had the right parents, would always be present. In those cases, he's also noticing. This seems fairly obvious, but it wasn't always obvious. There were times where parents were like, "This is when you get into folklore of, someone showed up in the night, some sort of fae, and planted a fake baby that is unrelated. Why does it look so different? Well, because genes can skip generations. You have recessive traits. They can combine in different ways. Old ways to explain it was you could have children that were somehow unrelated to you. None of those really made sense. And he's going like, no, the offspring always resemble the parents. Sometimes you might have to go back to grandparents and take a look at traits that are there. Plants that grew tall or short, he bred together. This is restating the experiment we did. One plant of each height. Yep, true breeding. To make a first generation, F1. Every offspring plant was tall, identical to their tall parents. He bred the F1 offsprings with themselves. So, okay, kids, go populate the world. To make a second generation, F2. And his actual results was 705 tall and 224 short plants. And so he noticed that, hey, that's roughly a ratio of 3 to 1. Tall to short. Now we now know these factors he's talking about. What do we call them? Loud. Yes? Genes. From your biological parents, you inherit genes. And these are, in fact, the units of hereditary. So now we're dovetailing the modern biochemical understanding, which we had already were able to figure out a lot about how this works, just by looking at how things were inherited. Now, the whole 1.5 medium tall, 1.5 leaves, how do you get these things? Part of the reason why it was difficult to tell at first is that there is a lot more complexity there. And a lot of early science works out when someone goes, I'm not going to worry about the really complicated stuff right now. I'm going to find something that is fairly simple and try to explain it. And all of these traits have that advantage. It's either yellow or green. It's never a yellowish green. It's never kind of constricted, inflated. The flowers are either purple or white. They're not like faint purple on a white flower. So for these types of traits, for other traits, this doesn't work so well. And I do have to emphasize, because it's repeated in every textbook quite often, that like we often use eye color to demonstrate it, but eye color often corresponds to Mendelian genetics, but there are edge cases that don't. It actually is a little bit more complicated. So you can't automatically assume both my parents have blue eyes, I have brown. Something funny happened at the hospital and I was replaced with someone else. Now, we're about to do a little bit more notes and drawing, and it is 11:15, so you have 5 minutes, given the amount of notes we've just done. Stand up, shake your legs, grab your phones if you want, put your phones back when we're done, go to the bathroom if you need. Have a drink of coffee. Should I turn the lights on? Right? Wake you up?
This one. This game doesn't matter. I'll show you last one. Wait. It's gonna be my first game of the season.
Whoa. Don't want that. Line spacing. Wait for a better deal on what? I think wait for a better deal. Wait, things go on sale.
Yeah, well, they say sale. Like, see that the yellow guy there? Yeah, so like, yeah, because it's Trump like every day, but every day Supercell makes its price like this is like the official price higher, so it's like you think your market higher.
Real stores do that. Have you heard of shrinkflation?
Yes. I saw it was a Packers game. They did like 16 or whatever. It did 15 for one empty spot.
Well, yeah. And they sell it for the same price.
Yeah.
Campbell's soup, like the big chunky soups.
It was small.
They made it taller, but thinner, and there's less in it, but it looks bigger.
That's crazy.
Because the tall fools the eye into thinking you're actually getting more.
I know.
Present.
So basically,
Okay, we are back. Put your phones away. Put them on in there, and let's go.
See that Justin Davis got McDonald's is up now? Justin Davis. He's up $2,000 now. He's made
Okay,
$12,000 last month.
I'm going to show how these factors. We're going to show it now, and then we're going to go through the different Mendelian laws, and we're going to do some more genetics later, and come back to Punnett squares, but just to show why we do 4 of everything and why that works so well. If we were to look at a true breeding tall, what kind of genes would it have? What would be its genotype?
TT.
Well, obviously they'd all be TT. I define capital T as tall and lowercase t as short. So what would be the genotype of a tall one?
A true
Yes. Capital T and capital T. So you have that. And then if we breed it with a short one, what would its genotype be?
lowercase t, lowercase.
Yes?
Lowercase.
Yeah. You can't call out, otherwise I can't call it. And then, what would the children be? Yes?
There's a 1, it should be tall T. Oh, wait, no, it's tall T, short T.
Right. So every you get one from your mom, one from your dad, and so it should be tall and then short, and all the offspring will look like that. Okay. So if we were to do this, this is our true breeding. Short, tall. This is our parent generation. This is our F1 generation. This is our genotype. What is the phenotype for that? Yeah. It would not be T.
Tall.
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 Tall. Julian?
Yeah.
Right. Not that Julian, that Julian. If I call it someone else, you don't need to join me. I'm going to go class dojo now. We're at C block. There we go.
You should get points for good behavior.
You should.
2-2.
Now, the reason we use Punnett squares is this is a fairly easy case. I'm going to show the exact same case in a Punnett square. So if you haven't seen one of those, you make a box. Extend it this way. You take the parents, put the parents above the box. And then you take the parents and you divide them up. So that becomes there, this becomes there, this becomes here, this becomes here. This little area here, if you wanted to draw it out, is to show who was what parent, if you happen so. By tradition, I think you put the dad here and you put the mom here, but to be honest, it doesn't really matter in terms of calculations. And then you just drop the genotypes in from each parent. And so you essentially just sort of drop them in on each side so you can see what it is. So the reason we often put 4, even if they're all the same, is you're always going to get 4 groupings. Now you might get all the same, in which case it's 100%, but 4 is always going to be involved in some way with the ratio. If we do that, this is our Punnett square. This is our parent generation. This is our F1 generation. What I would like you to do in here, then, is do the F1 to F2 generation as a Punnett square. So take the children and force them to breed.
No problem, Nerf.
Excellent.
I got you.
I'll do that for you.
Take out your paintbrush.
I will.
The pollen is coming for you.
No. Wait, Julian.
So draw a Punnett square just like I have, but you're going to put in slightly different things. Put in the children.
I'm confused. Making a Punnett square. How did you?
Those are the ones you're going to put in, but I don't want you to make it. So we have a blank
Capital T
Punnett
and
square.
capital T. It's math, basically. It's just,
You've
it's
got a blank
just
Punnett square,
expanding.
but you're not bringing the same ones. You're doing the children.
I act like they're variables.
So each parent is capital lowercase.
Do you act like they're variables?
Whatever letter comes first,
Should be one double short.
No.
Wow.
When I wrote those in there, I just realized I did an unwritten rule.
Higher case.
If you have 2 different genes, which one do you write first? The capital uppercase one. Yeah, the dominant one, as we'll define later.
which is T.
Yeah, yeah. Now, put those in each one.
Can I see yours?
Yeah. Try to check yours. You guys have yours? Where's your notes? Okay, then grab a set of paper notes, put away the laptop. You have a set of paper.
Wait, hear me out. I'll give you this stuff. First,
Yeah, that is wrong. You need to bring your notes. The laptop part isn't working. You gotta bring your notes. Otherwise, laptop's not working. And ideally, you want to get to the point where you're writing it, so you actually remember it if possible. Unless you can remember. Where's your other? Good. There we go. Good. Underneath it, you could put down the genotypic and phenotypic ratios. What would the ratio of each type be for the genotypes and the phenotypes?
oh, genotype is like the trait vector. No, genotype is
For one of them, yeah.
I got it.
Anders, move over there. And then Julian, move one over. Because you're on the edge. It's just easy.
But we're just talking while.
Yeah, it's quite
I've done my
loud.
Punnett square.
It's all Gulu, and I don't see a Punnett square.
Oh, I'll do my Punnett square.
Draw the square, put it in, and then start the phenotype and genotypic ratios.
I did that.
But move over first. And Julian, you move over. So the Julians are
What?
separated. You move there.
No, you can't be serious right now.
They are talking. I keep answering. I don't know why. It's weird.
You should like say
We're so far apart.
Yep. Yeah, because it doesn't matter where. It's big people. Yep. Yes.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Anders, quick.
Okay.
No, pick up your stuff.
Okay.
Go all the way over there.
Okay.
Dude, this is tragic.
And then grab your bag.
This is pretty cool.
Julian. Over. Excellent.
Julian, move your stuff.
Anders, part of your move is to keep commenting on Julian. Let's go. No sound effects. Okay. If we do a Punnett square for the F2,
That's percentage.
so when we put them together, most people should have something that looks like this. So you inherit it from each one. When you put it through, you put the capital one first. Put it through, capital one first, combine, and then we have a ratio that looks like this. How many of those,
Do I need to draw it?
or in other ways, what would be the phenotypic ratio? Jennifer,
Wait, it's you.
what does phenotype mean? Pardon?
Like the line. Yeah,
It's, sorry? I can't hear you. The monks are really loud. Say it again. The physical traits. So how many of them are tall? 3. And how many are short? 1. So our phenotypic ratio. Julian, stop kicking the chair. It's the other Julian. Stop talking when I'm talking to the other Julian. Okay. One second. Do you have all this down?
Do I have to draw another square?
Yes. That was the assignment. Phenotypic ratio is then 3:1. 4 tall to short. You can also use percents. It could be 75% to 25%. And just count everything out of 100. So what would the genotypic ratio be? See what? Caden. What would the genotypic ratio be?
1 T, 2 T, small t, and then 2, 1.
I believe that's correct. I just, while you're saying that, completely messed up writing genotypic. Please stop whistling. So you had 1 capital, capital, 2 capital, lowercase,
Is that ITT?
and 1 lowercase, lowercase. So the genotypic ratio is different than the phenotypic ratio because we don't see one of the genotypes. The one that has one of each, you only see tall. Yes?
And the square thing at the bottom left, is that ITT?
No, they all say tall. Are you talking about
No, like outside.
this?
The one that, like outside. That, yeah.
That?
Yeah.
That's the original parent. It is capital T,
Oh, okay.
lowercase t. If that helps. There you go. Except now it's green. So this is the F2. And the parents were the F1. Where did... kind of already did that in there. I left a bunch of space, but I think I've managed to get everything into there, so I don't need to use that. Anybody still writing that down?
Yes.
Why is your laptop up? Put laptop in back. Okay. No? Okay. Down to there?
Okay, that's good.
So in terms of what you'll be doing later on, I'll be giving you a variety of different parents or traits or offsprings and asking you for the phenotypic and genotypic ratios. And how many will have these traits, which traits are dominant, recessive, and so on. Sorry, I once again just moved on without asking a question. Is anybody not done writing? There we go. His conclusions. Mendel. He realized he discovered the rules of inheritance. As I said about this time, some people's interpretations of the rules were a little weird. People saying that maybe women didn't have anything to do with it, which denied, direct evidence. And there was a lot of people theorizing as to what it could be. He had numbers. He could really show that no, there's factors being passed down. They are directly affecting the offspring. All the characteristics are going from parents to offspring. And this directly leads into evolution and how you can select for and against traits. Because there are also some ideas here that your environment is what's determining what you look like. So in the same way that if you exercise or if you row a lot, you develop calluses, the thought was like, if you're an animal and you need to reach leaves and all the leaves on the bottom of the tree are eaten and you stretch your neck a lot, then your children will have longer necks. That was a type of evolutionary theory proposed that was called Lamarckism. And we now know that's not true. If you stretch a lot, your children don't magically have longer necks. Things you do in life do not necessarily be passed down in that way. Interestingly, though, one of the major areas that we have found out in the last decade or so is that although you don't get new traits from that, the traits you do have can be affected by your environment. So your environment can shut off certain genes or turn other ones on, and they can do so in sort of a semi-permanent way. So your children very much might actually have a different expression of their genes, which is very Lamarckism. and that was a big realization. One of the big ones is they noticed that, did I do this one about children in very harsh starving conditions? Never mentioned that story. They've noticed that the children and grandchildren of people who previously, as children, went through like terrible times. So they were in periods of starvation. They are in a product of wartime. Their parents weren't around. They had to really struggles to survive and weren't always getting the best nutrition and the best care. Their children and their grandchildren have lower rates of diabetes, heart disease, and a host of other factors that makes them just generally healthier over life. And that helped elucidate some of the products by which certain genes are turned on and off. And it turns out if you've had a harsh upbringing, certain genes in your body get turned on in different ways such that you will live a little longer, because it might take you longer to find someone that's a mate because your youth is being so tough. And that gets passed on to your children and grandchildren, and then it sort of fades out if they're living relatively normal lives. Which is why I proposed to Mrs. Handley when we had our spawn, is that it'd probably be a good idea if I beat my children and starved them periodically, because then the grandchildren would be healthier. We would just be doing it for the grandchildren.
Thinking ahead.
Yeah. I may have benefited from that. My grandfather grew up in Russia, and he was abandoned by his parents. They think his parents died. He was taken in by a couple who, they had him live in the barn. He wasn't allowed to live in with the other people. He had to live with in his words, I had to live with the animals. They didn't feed him very much, and essentially he was their unpaid farmhand, would be a nice way to put it, until eventually he ran away from home. And he had a really tough upbringing. So hopefully I got the benefit of that without having to do the hardship. Unfortunately, it's probably going to die out by the time my kids, because that's great grandchildren. So if I take, Kirk and Wilbur, and I treat them incredibly badly, am I not actually helping them in some way?
No.
Unfortunately, Ms. Handley said no, and I wasn't allowed to do it. So please don't call child services.
You should
Yes.
do it anyway.
What happens if you stack those traits off, so you kept turning all the bad ones off, like bad upbringing and bad upbringing and bad upbringing, on and on? And
Yeah,
you get
over time.
superhuman grandchildren.
Maybe. I don't think superhuman goes there, because the question is, why wouldn't those genes be on all the time? It might have to do with the fact, there might be other factors in that if you are not in a harsh environment, you actually become more competitive earlier. So it just might mean that you develop faster. It's not necessarily good or bad, it's just living longer is only one type of thing that they are measuring. There might be other things that maybe made it worse. Don't know. But that is, now I realized, confusing, because it has nothing to do with we're doing. That's just an interesting aside in biochemistry that's coming back. He proposed that there are hereditary factors. I don't know how to spell hereditary. Well, go away, line. Oh, those voices sound very high for monks. And then you have the sudden realization, wait a minute, monks were all male. Why do they have high voices? And then you realize parents sold their children to the monasteries. And then you go, oh.
I don't understand.
Oh, they didn't actually sell their children. They just gave their children to the monastery, and the monastery gave them a gift.
I don't get this.
The last castrati died in 1922. The practice was you would take in young children for the choir, and young children all have very high voices, regardless of biological gender. So how could you make the male children, because you're not going to take in female children into your monastery? Oh, heaven forbid. So how do you make them keep their high voices?
You can make them.
Yes?
If you practice using a high voice.
Oh, you sweet summer child. Yeah, that's one way. No. Because there's this thing called puberty that happens, and sometimes, no matter your training, it's going to affect your voice. If you have testosterone flowing through your system, your voice will become deeper, your what we call our Adam's apple or voice box will become larger. It's physically larger, which is why it's deeper. So the reason a, say, bass guitar or bass of any kind, the instrument is bigger, so it has a deeper sound because it has a longer wavelength. But how would we keep the nice, high, piping voices and not having that occur? Yes.
Just got a question.
No, I want an answer to the question. Yes.
I just wanna know that.
You can't you can not make it small. You can stop it from changing. Yes? Castration. That's why they're called the castrati. They just took in the young children and snip, snip. Made sure that there was no testes to worry about. Again, it's amazing how often there's Game of Thrones reference. And then their voices would stay. They never undergo puberty. It was actually often considered luxurious. Some of them were treated a bit like, well, we would say like movie stars today, because they would sing, they had beautiful voices, they're very popular. They didn't have to worry about, say, romantic entanglements, because they didn't really care about that as much anymore. The last one died in 1922. The practice continued for quite a long time. And all of it was voluntary. The parents would give the children, and the children would go, sure, because they don't have a choice. Yes.
Does touching receipts give you estrogen?
Oh, God, no.
Why are you pointing at me?
I just heard that this new thing is going around. This sounds like the old one with Subway stuff. You're fine. You can touch receipts. If you want to change your testosterone, just get a little bit more exercise. That's literally that will outweigh anything else you do. Receipts are fine. As a chemist. What do we call these hereditary factors now?
Genes.
Genes. The thing I'm not wearing today.
That was hilarious, man.
Thank you. They were responsible for the traits of organisms, and there were different versions. Why are there people packing up? You should have everything out until you are dismissed. Those different, now we know that these are genes, we already said that and I wrote it up before, but what are different versions of the same gene called?
No. Sorry, man.
Starts with an A. Alleles.
Guess I gotta go now.
No, you in particular must stay.
Sorry.
I'm going to make you skip the next class
Okay.
and then get in trouble for it
Okay.
and then do Sunday detention of some kind. What's your next class?
Branch.
Oh,
I'll
no,
be
fate
happy
worse
to
than
skip.
death. You must go.
I'll be happy
No,
to
that's your
skip.
Can I
punishment.
stay here?
No.
Branch's
Absolutely
class
not.
is my punishment.
I don't
No.
have brunch. I have to lift them.
This is actually not.
Branch's class is like good. He's more like 3.
Does he just talk and then give you a worksheet?
I don't so not bad overrated. I don't do anything.
You guys have like, I have a slim chest and
I don't like to honestly.
Like I remember.
That's what I was like. Everyone's lazy. It's like, wow. I'm not good at this.
My plan is just normally everything and that's fine. Because then they won't be able to ask questions.
Are they gonna ask? Okay.
If you can get it, that would be great. If you have an iPad of any kind, Mark, you can set up.
Oh,
That would be
stop
a
it.
really good method. If you ask any of the students who do that, I have lots of grade 12s who do that. That way you can get like a Bluetooth keyboard fairly quickly and type and then switch to a pen and then you have the best of both worlds. It'd be fantastic.
I'm going
if
to
you could.
class too.
I understand if you
I
can't.
remember what mine was. So if I mess up my wording, like they're gonna be like, damn, she's.
See you. Enjoy your next class. Try not to think about insects.